Absolutely. Why don't you give the quick overview of your story?
Sure. I grew up in God's country, a place called New Jersey, if you ever heard of it. From there, I went to Annapolis, then got a master's degree in Georgetown, and off I went into this crazy adventure we call the United States Marine Corps, which I loved every second of it. Was commissioned and then became an artilleryman. Spent 9 years in the Corps, first in Hawaii, then bounced around throughout Asia. And then 9/11 hit. And it was very frustrating for me because, my family's from the New York City area. My sister was like literally impacted and treated at the towers. And like, there I was in Mount Fuji, Japan. And so like, I knew I couldn't get out at that point. And then for me, it was a matter of like, how do I get to the war? Like, I'm a Marine. I deserve, like, my job is to fight. And it wasn't easy. Like, I'd been in the fleet for a while and they tried to send me to Jackson, Mississippi. And I remember I was at what we call expeditionary warfare school. And I tried to change orders. I know that doesn't happen, but I was able to find a guy who just had a baby. We had a few drinks and I convinced him to stay home with his daughter. And I was able to get to Camp Pendleton and off I went. I was actually I served under Jim Mattis, 1st Marine Division, part of the Battle of Fallujah. We shaped it a little bit. And then I begged and pleaded to get down to the battalion, and I joined 2-5. And we tried to hold the city of Ramadi for those 7 months. Incredibly challenging. This is 2004, 2005. So for the folks who are familiar with that era, it was a tough fight. Unit probably took over 260 wounded, 15 KIA. But God, it was an incredible experience. And it was such an honor to serve in the Marine Corps during that time. It was then when really had to really start understanding innovation, right? Because you're fighting an enemy that is a very difficult enemy to identify. And, I was an artilleryman with an infantry battalion, so I just couldn't go around blowing everything up because we were operating in a city. So I had to use my brain and really think through how I could leverage a lot of these things we would call non-kinetic effects. So the civil affairs team, how could we use information operations and other attachments that I had? How can I use them to get an effect on the battlefield? And like, how could I work to really win some of those hearts and minds of the local populace, the populace that, it's hard for us to understand. So innovated so many different things, learned a ton of lessons. I'll give you a quick story. Like one time, I had unlimited money where I could find an Iraqi contractor and try to fund them. But every time we'd find an Iraqi contractor, they get killed, right? They would get their heads cut off, and they would make a movie about it. And so it was very hard. And finally, I found a guy, asked him to build a school. He built a beautiful school, and of course, the day I paid him, it got blown to smithereens. And so, I don't know who blew up that school. I don't know if it was a terrorist. I don't know if it was him. He wanted more money. So after that time, I was like, you know what, guys, like enough. You're going to pave the roads. You're going to like clean up the garbage. So that's what's hitting us with IEDs. And so you're always having to think and try to outthink the enemy. Tough fight. I transitioned from there, and long story, I was going to stay in the government, but I met a woman who is now my wife, and she was an investment banker, and she's like, look, why don't you like go down and meet that buddy of yours from 1-3? I know, David, you were in Hawaii, so first time, 3rd Marines, we served together. He had gone through business school, and he had gotten a job in finance, and he'd done it like the normal track. She's like, why don't you go down and talk to him? And I did. And like, at that time in 2006, like finance was just going crazy. Like people were making all kinds of money. And one thing led to the next, and got hired on the spot. And then I launched my career in finance. But maybe I'll pause there, and we can pick up from there if you want.